All right. I am a couple shots in deep by this point. But I figured now was a better time than any to start redoing this again. What's the goal today? I feel like I want to get at least halfway through this, but I've underestimated this shit before because I feel like it's going to take me like a fucking hours to do this. So I might as well get through this. Several police vehicles crowded the normally sleepy area of Vale. Several officers were putting up police tape, the flashing lights of their police cruisers illuminating the dark night. A few passerby huddled around, wondering what had happened. A single woman, a ramphaunus with curved horns, was crying hysterically as she struggled to recount what she'd found. A detective patiently jotted down the details, his face grim. Ma'am, please calm down. I know it's hard, but just try to start from the beginning, all right? The officer's voice was tired, but he was concerned. It was horrible, she sobbed. She allowed herself a minute to compose herself as much as she could, then continued. I was on my way to the grocery store, and I noticed that the windows were blacked out. Normally, Tuxton wouldn't close the shop until 8 in the evening, so I thought it was odd. At first, I thought he had gone out to lunch, so I decided to stop by after. You see, he often offers to help me with my groceries. Right. And about what time was this? The first time I passed by, it was a little past noon. And the second time, it was about 2? Maybe 2:30. I'm not sure. My hands were full, and so I couldn't check my scroll. The woman hugged herself in an attempt to stop shaking. Of course. So when you were returning from the market, what happened? Like I said, I was going to stop by to check on Tuxon. He was a kind soul. When I came by the second time, the lights were still out, so I tried the door to see if it was open. And it was. What did you see when you stepped inside? I saw blood all over the bookshelves, and I almost let out a scream, but I felt so scared I couldn't. I wanted to leave immediately, but I heard strange noises coming from behind the counter. It was just wishful thinking at that point. Her voice cracked as she recalled. This is when you saw it. The detective had lowered its notepad and looked into the woman's eyes. She was clearly still shaken, but she nodded. What did it look like? It must have been a grim, but I'd never seen or heard of any like that before. It was almost human shaped, but it was crouched over Tuxton's body. Strange tentacles were sticking out from behind his back, and that face. Oh, gods, she cried, burying her face into her hands. You mentioned before that I'd had only one eye? He asked, after a short pause. The woman composed herself once more. Yes, detective, but it had human teeth. It looked like some sort of corpse possessed by a grim. I was so scared I dropped my groceries and his head snapped towards me. I thought I was as good as dead. What happened after that? We just stared at each other for what felt like hours. Its eye. It was hideous. It was almost all black, but the center was red. I couldn't move, and it slowly began to get up. Did it hurt you? No, it just left. Once I thought I was safe, I ran outside and called the police. Is there anything else that you remember? The grim. It looked human, she repeated. From the look in her eyes, she could never forget its features. You said the lights were out. Are you sure? He asked with a tinge of doubt. Hesitantly, he made a note in his report. Yes, it had white hair, and it didn't have any claws. It had fingers covered in blood. It looked like it was wearing some sort of leather clothes or something, but it wasn't fur or scales. Well, aside from its strange appendages. Right, I'll make a note of it. But this is unheard of, ma'am. I'm afraid I have to consult with bleh. I'm afraid I'll have to consult with one of the professors at Beacon to confirm this. The detective sighed as he put his notepad away and rubbed his eyes. Listen, ma'am, if you remember anything else, don't hesitate to call, all right? We're going to get to the bottom of this. Thank you. Faunus woman ran off to a human man standing behind the red police tape. The two embraced, and he tried to comfort her. The detective turned to the bookstore, mentally preparing himself. Hesitantly, he walked in. He was careful not to step on any blood, but it was spattered everywhere. Eventually, he arrived to the victim, who was covered by a white sheet. He tried not to focus on the large blots of red bleeding through and talked to his partner. So, we have a cause of death yet? It's actually kind of surprising, said a young woman. She was crushed over the body. The ME said if it was really a Grim that did this, then the decapitation or disembowelment would have been the obvious cause, but despite the blood everywhere, the victim was already dead when whatever it was began feeding on his body. The blood doesn't show like it was flowing or pumping from the body. So this is a murder. So this was a murder? He asked, confused. It didn't sit right to him. If the gunshot to his head is any indication, then yes. The thing that began eating him was just an unfortunate circumstance after the fact. This night just keeps getting better and better. Let's just be grateful that she didn't get killed. Say what you will about this Texan guide. We found some evidence that he was involved with the White Fang. After a little digging, it looked like he was about to flee the kingdom. So this was a hit by the White Fang? Jeez, nothing can ever be simple around here, can it? First, those damn robberies at all the dust shops a few months ago, which stopped as suddenly as they started, and now this? Some poor bastard's gonna get killed, and now there's a Grim loose in the city? What good are those damn huntsmen if they can't keep these monsters outside the walls? Either way, we have to ask Professor Ospen about this. Grim trekking is way out of our jurisdiction. Right, you wanna come with? Nah, my girl gets embarrassed when I go to visit her. If you do see her, tell her I said to stay out of trouble and to leave that poor girl on our team alone. If Coco doesn't listen to you, I doubt she'd listen to me. He chuckled humorously. Yeah, well, you can't fault Mom for trying. Following the day, the following morning at Beacon, Osmond was attempting to convince Glinda to be lenient with the first years. The food fight had indeed caused a ton of damage, but she was easily able to fix it. They're supposed to be protectors of the world, not children. I know, but they don't need to grow up so fast. Children soldiers were the first to die in war, and they won't be able to enjoy these days for long. Once classes start, feel free to be as strict as you like, but as of now, it's still technically their break. Glinda wanted to argue, but decided against it. She took out her scroll to see she had a message. It seems the Vale Police Department is requesting an audience with you. Did they mention what this is about? He asked, taking a sip from his mug. God. Fuck. Excuse me. No, just that it's urgent. Right. Well, no sense in keeping them waiting. On the streets of Vale, a lone figure walked aimlessly. He wore a mismatched ensemble of clothes he had swept from a local laundromat and a white medical eye patch over his left eye. While he didn't have any destination in mind, a pleasant smell caught his attention and began to follow it. Coffee, he whispered to himself. He found himself in front of a small cafe. Despite his better judgment, he enters, trying not to draw too much attention to himself. Welcome, greeted a young woman behind the counter. Take a seat anywhere. I'll be right with you. The young man didn't budge as he simply stared at the woman, or more notably, her large rabbit ears on her head. Was this some sort of maid cafe deal with a furry theme? It didn't make sense given she was dressed in casual clothes and an apron. Is something wrong? The faunus woman asked. She took a better look at his attire. Are you not from around here? Are you lost? Something like that, he replied, snapping out of his stupor. When she questioned him, her ears moved as if expressing confusion. He walked over to a corner store and took a seat. Well, hello, I'm Marble. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee. Cream and sugar? No, black is fine. Great. Can I offer you anything else? We're pretty well known for our cakes. No, I'm not very hungry. Marble nodded and went back to the counter where she poured his coffee. The overall atmosphere had begun to calm his nerves, and when he got his coffee, he felt peaceful. He took a sip and relished in the flavor. His hands held the cup gently as he began to organize his thoughts together. Last night was too close to call. Finding a body was a blessing, but he was so distracted by this that he didn't notice that woman walk in on him. Thankfully, he had enough foresight to wear his mask, but how much had she seen? He frowned, knowing that it didn't matter. He was a ghoul, and she would report it as such. How's the coffee? Marble asked, snapping him out of his thoughts. Oh, it's wonderful, he smiled politely. He reached into his pocket to take out some money and placed it on the table. Is this enough? Excuse me? She asked curiously. She picked up the coins and bill and examined it. What is this? Oh, he began to inspect the clothes he borrowed and found them mostly empty. What he did find was a few cards that resembled credit cards. He took them out and extended them out to her questioningly. Is this enough? You really are from around here, she said mostly to herself. Is this all you have? Do I need more? Is this all your money? She asked again, almost motherly. Uh, yeah, I guess. He pocketed his useless currency and sighed. Well, look, I don't want to leave you without any Leanne. She looked around the empty cafe and sighed. You seem like a nice young man, and since my daughter is going off to Beacon tomorrow, I'll be pretty short-staffed around here. Would you be able to fill in for her? I mean, if you don't mind working for a honest ran business, it's like Antiku all over again. As yet, as he had that thought, he felt a headache forming. What was Antiku? Blurry images of a cafe entered his mind, but nothing else. He tried to focus on the scene, but Marvel's voice brought him back to reality. It might actually help business if we had a human in front taking orders. I'd love to work here. He finally managed to get out. Marble smiled gently and then realized something. Oh, how rude of me. I never got your name. Kaneki, he replied hesitantly, as if testing how the name felt on his tongue. He thought a little harder. Ken Kaneki. Nice to meet you, Kaneki. Professor? Glinda asked grimly. What do you take of this? This is very concerning, he admitted. His mouth was a line as he looked over the notes he had received from the detective. If this is indeed a Grim, then she must be working on infusing more intelligence. However, if this report is accurate, I'm not sure if this is truly a Grim. What are you saying? Everything is pointing to it being a Grim. At first glance, yes, but there are several key things that throw that theory out the window. Firstly, the witness that saw it feeding was the witness that saw it feeding was a civilian, and in her statement she clearly expressed her fear of it. Yet the creature didn't censor. Grimm are universally attracted to negative emotion, and fear for one's life is as negative as it gets. Secondly, it is never mentioned to have any sort of bone plates on it. Even the weakest Grimm have a mask like structure, yet this one didn't. So this thing is nothing we've seen before. The biggest thing that concerns me is the fact that it reportedly had white hair and red pupils surrounded by black sclera. Linda's eyes widened in realization. This creature might share some sort of this creature might share some sort of relation to her. If that's the case, we might be entering a new era of war. Usman sighed after a short pause. However, if we're lucky, this might be something else entirely. Regardless of how we look at this is a bad, but perhaps not as bad as we may think. With all due respect, what are the chances of that? Slim, he admitted. I need to discuss it with Professor Port and Dr. Ublek. That night, Kaneki arrived at the cafe a few minutes before the agreed time Marvel had requested him. The bell rang as he'd entered the cafe. Oh, welcome, a young woman who looked almost exactly like Marble greeted him. She wore the same apron, although she was clearly much younger. Are you the new hire? My mom told me about you. Yeah, I'm Ken Kaneki, he replied. You must be Velvet. That's right. I'm supposed to show you around a little since my classes are starting up again tomorrow. She smiled warmly at him as she approached him with a second apron. I'm glad you're I'm glad that you're going to be picking up the slack around here. My mom doesn't know when to give herself a break. Oh, he replied, unsure how to respond to that. If you come over to this side, I can show you the different things we serve. The coffee grounds are in the cabinet, and all the refrigerated things are in the cooler in the kitchen. There's milk and all sorts of juices. Right, he nodded. Beva glanced up at the clock. Well, we're usually busiest in the morning and at night. But since everyone is but since everybody is on break, tonight should be pretty quiet. Are you hungry? Oh no, I'm fine, he replied quickly. I don't have any money to pay for anything anyway. That's no big deal, Bubba grinned. Mom lets all the employees eat during their shift. Really, I'm fine. All right, if you insist. Belva continued to show him around the cafe, making idle chit chat. Kaneki, for the most part, was relieved with this temporary situation, but he knew he shouldn't get too comfortable. He needed to get a steady source of food before he began feeling the damned hunger pains. He blinked out for a second when Velvet began to wave her hand in front of his face. Are you alright? Yeah, I'm sorry, he replied sheepishly. Just a lot on my mind. Where are you from? She asked suddenly. Kaneki looked at her with wide eyes. Oh, I didn't mean to pry. It's just Mom told me you seemed lost when you arrived. I don't know, he replied evasively. The truth was that he didn't remember. He only had vague memories of his past. Before he entered the cafe, he remembered Antieku, and drinking some coffee had triggered something for him to remember. He then remembered something that Marble had said to him when he offered him the job. Sam, Velvet? Yeah, she seemed a bit concerned with his apparent amnesia. Your mother said it would be helpful if a human was taking orders, he began slowly. He wasn't sure how to ask if she or her mother were ghouls without giving himself away. What did she mean by that? Are you serious? Asked Velvet. She didn't seem offended, but rather curious. Wait, are you a faunus with a hidden trait? A what? Now Velvet even looked Now Velvet even looked even more confused. Kaneki, do you know what a faunus is? She asked carefully. To her shock, Kaneki shook his head. Well, I'm one, she offered as her ears wriggled a little. What's the difference between a faunus and a human? He asked. Velvet touched her chin as she began to think. Well, the simplest way of putting it is that faunus have traits that resemble animals, she explained. My mom and I have these ears. There are a lot of other differences, but that's the most visible ones. A lot of faunus can't really hide them, so we stuck out in a crowd. Why would you want to hide them? You really aren't from around here, she said to herself. Your mother said the same thing, Kaneki said. He really needed to work on blending in. It's kind of a touchy subject with most of us, but it really just boils down to discrimination. A lot of humans don't like us and will go out of their way to torment us. It ranges from a lot of things like getting bullied, not wanting to work with us, or even trying to sabotage Faunus's businesses. Not to mention the racist remarks we hear every day. Kaneki remained silent, although he sympathized with the girl. Velvet and her mother seemed to be very kind people, and they were likely taken advantage of. Anyway, let's get back to business. Velvet turned and began to walk into the kitchen area. Uh, I don't want to go to class, Yang grumbled as she covered her head with her pillow. Can we have another week off? Don't be preposterous, we said to her. Our break was long enough. Are you saying you look forward to sitting in Professor Port's class? Asked Yang. Whether I look forward to it or not is irrelevant. I need to learn to become better huntresses. What? We need to learn to become better huntresses. I don't think we'll learn much from listening to stories of his youth, mused Blake. Guys, I think we should Fuck, I suck. Guys, I think we should get back to this conversation later, Ruby announced. We're gonna be late again. Didn't you set an alarm? Weiss asked, looking at her scroll. Talk about deja vu, Yang groaned as she sprung out of bed already dressed. Let's go. Ugh. Excuse me. The four girls bolted down the hallways, leaving a trail of dust as they did. Luckily, they already knew where their first class was and made it with about a minute to spare. Jesus. They took their usual seats and began to catch their breath. Woke up late again? Yeah, I didn't set an alarm, Ruby admitted. She turned to Velvet, who was looking at pictures on her scroll. How was your break? Oh, it was fine. I got to work on my photography. Want to see? Sure, Ruby chirped. She scooted closer to the upperclassmen and stared at her scroll. Ruby didn't seem to get Velvet's vision and just laughed awkwardly. These are, nice. Thanks, Velvet replied, not hearing the uncertainty in her voice. As she scrolled, there was a clear picture of a bookstore that was surrounded by red tape. Whoa, what happened there? Asked Ruby. Did somebody break in? Oh no, Velvet shook her head. It's actually really sad. This was a bookshop I used to go to when I was little, and Coco's mom is working on an investigation on it. Which bookstore? Asked Blake, her ears pricking underneath her bow. Tuxon's book trade, Velvet sighed wistfully. I only found out this morning, but Coco sent me the pictures. I didn't want to believe her when she told me what happened. What happened? Asked Ruby. Tuxon was, killed, Velvet replied uneasily. Ruby felt a chill go up her spine. Wha Why? She asked. I don't know the details, admitted Velvet. This all happened yesterday. The Faunus community is up in arms about it. They demand that whoever did this is brought to justice, but a lot of us already know that's not going to matter. What do you mean? Asked Yang. When this sort of thing happens, the first few days there's an uproar, but then the police rarely get to the bottom of it. Coco's mom has tried to get cases reopened when new evidence comes up, but most of the time the department doesn't want to spend the resources for it. That sounds terrible, Ruby whispered. Good morning, class, boomed Professor Port. The five girls scooted back to their spots as the lecture began, although now they only thought of the incident in Vale. Will that be all for you, sir? Asked Kaneki with a smile. Yeah, I think so, said an older gentleman. He was reading a newspaper and furrowed his brow at the contents. Great, I'll go get that started for you. He walked over to the counter and wasted no time in getting the drink ready. Barbara looked down from the kitchen window with a small smile. No more than 2 minutes passed, and Kaneki served the hot coffee to the customer. Enjoy your coffee and let me know if we can interest you in any of our famous desserts. Our special for today is tiramisu, but we have others available. I'll consider it, young man, the man with a small smile. The man said with a small smile. I don't think I've seen you around here before. Are you new? Yes, sir, Kaneki replied with a bow. Today is my first day. Well, you're doing an excellent job. Normally it's Marble and her daughter that take orders, but you're every bit as hospitable. I'm glad you think so, sir. With the conversation done, Kaneki walked over to other tables and began to clean them. He listened to the news plan on the screen behind the tea counter. VPD had yet to release an official statement of the incident last night, but neighbors are already in arms around it. Tucson, owner of Tucson's book trade, was found dead in a shop in the early afternoon Sunday. Some are claiming it was a race-related incident, while others have spread rumors that Tucson was involved with the White Fang. If you have any information, please contact the Vale Police Department. That sounds pretty bad, sighed the older man. Poor old Tucson. He was a nice young man. You knew him? Asked Kaneki before he could stop himself. The older man nodded solemnly. Yeah, he was a book-loving man, but I guess he might have gotten involved with the wrong folks. Wonder what's gonna happen to his bookstore. Kaneki nodded, feeling a tinge of guilt before he tried to rationalize the situation. It was true he found a body in the bookstore that he began to eat, but he was already dead. It's not like he killed him. He shook the thoughts from his mind. He made his way back behind the counter to wipe it down. Team Ruby sat quietly in the cafeteria. Ruby was shook from hearing that there was a murderer on the loose. She had long ago accepted that there were monsters that were out to end humanity, but for a person to go out of the way to kill another seemed wrong. Human and faunus were all on the same side. Why would there be inner fighting? Blake seemed visibly upset from the news Velvet shared, but knew she couldn't do anything. She hadn't known Tucson personally, but she knew there was a few faunas that tried to leave the White Fang long before she did. To know the fate of the deserters made an angry knot form in her stomach. Weiss felt guilty. Not too long ago, she knew that if she had heard the same news, she would have been indifferent at best. At worst, she'd think good riddance. Her team, mostly Blake, had opened her eyes and it made her sick. She stole a glance towards Blake, wondering how she was taking it. Ying poked at her food, not having an appetite. She was well aware of bad people, her mother being Exhibit A. And while it didn't sadden her as it once did, it definitely bummed her out. Seeing Cardin pick on Velvet the semester before and seeing how Blake hid her heritage made her realize how much she had taken being human for granted. Guys, began Ruby, what do you think? It sucks, replied Young, knowing exactly what she was referring to. Do you think the White Fang are really behind this, asked Weiss? I mean, it's what I've heard on the news. The news is full of biased idea, Blake sighed. But that doesn't mean it might not be true. The only way to know for sure is to investigate this ourselves. If the White Fang did do it, then Tucson was trying to find it out. And if they aren't, somebody must be hunting their members, not caring if they're active or not. How can we be sure this wasn't a one-time thing, asked Yang. I mean, sure, a lot of what you guys are saying is true, but could have been a robbery gone wrong, yeah? That's true, nodded Ruby, but I think we should still look into this. Agreed, Blake nodded. I'm not gonna let you do this without me, Weiss added. Blake gave her a meaningful look. Then count me in too, said Yang. Alright, first thing after class, we'll head out to Vale. Oof. Chapter 1. Done. Alright. Ah! Flashbang! Ah! God. Hang on. Let me take another drink. Oh, yeah. Excuse me. Chapter 2. Strawberry Shortcake. Absolutely not. An orange-haired man paced back and forth and he shouted into his scroll. This man was the notorious criminal Roman Torchwick. The normally suave and collected man was visibly irritated as he walked around the warehouse. My employer is having our mutts move all the dust to another location, and I have to oversee it. If you guys wind up me having another hench assistant who's been helping this last week well, then you'll be getting much more involved than we agreed. You aren't to come within 5, no, 10 miles of the warehouse until tomorrow. Do I make yourself clear? You're kicking me out? Asked a young man on the other line. His tone lacked emotions for the most part, but it seemed a bit disappointed. No, no, this is temporary, assured Torchwick. He sighed tiredly, taking a breath to calm himself down. After tonight, the place is all yours. I doubt we'll need it again, but on the off chance that we do, well, then things have to go back to how they've been these last few weeks. It almost sounds like you care about me, the voice on the other end mused. Torchwick groaned in annoyance. You got it, Jack. Don't even think that this is me cashing in the favor you owe me, punk. The situation is in both our best interest. Torchwick shut his scroll, ending the call and turning back to the warehouse. For a moment, he allowed himself to revel in the sheer quantity of the sullen dust. Torchwick was well aware that he was one of the best in the business, but the mounds of crates and shipping containers plastered with the iconic Schnee Dust Company snowflake was beyond his wildest imaginings. He took a cigar from his coat pocket. He took a cigar from his coat pocket and lit it. Aside from taking orders from that she-devil, these results almost make dealing with her and her runts worth it. He inhaled deeply and slowly blew the smoke out. Damn, I suck. Earlier that day, Team Ruby sat in their dorm and I heard her feet lingering around them. Ruby was hanging halfway off her bed, her view of the room upside down as she sighed for the upteenth time. I really thought we'd find something by now, Yang lamented from her bed, where she was lying on her back. She was throwing mock punches at the ceiling to pass the time, but there was an obvious lack of enthusiasm. It's like whoever did it came out of nowhere and disappeared. Excuse me. Or the police are hiding something, Blake muttered under her breath bitterly, tossing aside a folder and opening a new one. It wouldn't have been the first time. Why would they have any incentive to do that, though? Asked Weiss. She was sat at the desk looking over the team's notes. I know the police aren't always the most reliable, but it doesn't explain why they actively try to keep everything under wraps. We've been at this for over 2 weeks now. Yang sat up and shrugged. Unless somebody high up there told them to, I mean, huntsmen and huntresses aren't the only ones who have a chain of command, right? That would only cause more questions, asked sighed Weiss, rubbing her forehead. I mean, even our notes aren't exactly lined up. The people I talked to claim to have never spoken to Tuxan, while Ruby found more than a few acquaintances. I swear I had asked some of those same people too. It's probably because of your last name, Blake replied bluntly, closing her own notes. I can vouch for you now, but on the first day we met, I wanted nothing to do with you, much less befriend you. We tried to argue, but Blake pressed on. Most of the reasons had less to do with you and more to do with your family. Although it was pretty pretentious of you to have your butlers cut around all your dust. Still, we mumbled, looking a bit ashamed. I'm not my father. Of course you're not, Ruby offered gently, finally including herself in the conversation. She rolled over and looked at her team. Did you find anything else weird? Asked Yang, sitting up. Weiss turned for a moment and ruffled through a few pages. Not really. How do you think Velvet is holding up? Asked Ruby. I haven't seen her in class these last few days. I heard from Coco she'd been spending the last 2 weekends in Vel to be closer to her mom, informed Yang. Oh, did you guys know that Coco's mom works for the VPD? Apparently, she was one of the first detectives on the scene. You think she knows why the VPD are being so secretive about this? Asked Blake, her bow shifting a little. It's a long shot, but maybe she let something slip to Coco. Yang shook her head and Yang shook her head. I asked her already, but all she said was that it was out of their jurisdiction or something. Weiss and Blake palmed their face in unison. What? Do you know what that means? Asked Weiss, struggling not to raise her voice. I mean, why did I say that? Like I was about to fucking reply to Weiss. Blah. Yeah, it means that they aren't equipped to handle the investigation or that a different department is taking care of it, answered Yang readily. Vale Police Department has jurisdiction everywhere within the city of Vale, we said exaggeratedly. Yeah, and? Asked Ruby, not following along. Yang, however, had a moment of realization. There are only a few things that are out of their jurisdiction, Blake sighed tiredly. Anything that's too big for them is taken care of by a huntsman. That list of things can range from terrorism, grim attacks, and declarations of war from other nations. And we're still in training, Yang grinned defeatedly. Meaning we can't investigate this anymore until we graduate, unless we're magically given permission from Osman. We rolled our eyes at Yang's sarcasm, like that would happen. Even if we can't investigate this, we should at least check up on Velvet, Ruby decided. She's our friend, and she probably needs us now. Glinda watched in mild concern as the headmaster Osman rubbed his temples for the millionth time. She had personally gone over all the notes the VPD had given them, but Osman bordered on obsession as he threw himself over his notes. Professor, you should get some rest, Glinda repeated tiredly. I'm aware of that, Osman replied evenly, though it was evident he wasn't paying her advice any mind. He looked over the desk, reminiscent of a war strategist looking over a map, contemplating his next move. This just doesn't add up. We're likely missing something then. The VPD does its work well, but this isn't something they were trained for. If anything, we should have a huntsman or two shadow them just in case this gets worse. That's what's worrying me, Glinda. Osmond looked up, his eyes slightly bloodshot, but his demeanor as calm as ever. The crime scene, the witness statement, and the cameras that managed to catch a blur of the thing that did this all point to Grim in nature. In fact, a young Grim, given by how savagely the body was torn apart. Perhaps it was making a statement, Glinda offered. If we go with the theory that this creature could be more like Salem than, say, a Beowulf, maybe the excessive gore was to get our attention? My thoughts exactly, he agreed, his shoulders sagging out with exhaustion. Salem would never make a move this bold, much less this far into the main kingdom. Yet this thing has not just allowed its presence to be known, but it nearly shouted its existence to the world. This brings us with two possibilities. Which are what, sir? It is a completely rogue Grim that has no understanding of how resilient and resourceful mankind can be, nor the danger that they pose when united together, he answered, trailing off. He finally gave in and sat into his chair, running his hand through his hair. Or it understands all of this and simply doesn't care. This is beyond alarming, Glinda muttered, touching her chin in thought. If it's the latter, chances are that we'll need to form a team of husbandsmen to take care of it. Once it's found, of course, Osmond leaned forward to look at the blurry image of the creature running down the streets of Vale. What are you plotting? It's only gonna get worse from me, people. I don't even know how deep I am right now. I think I'm like 12 in, I'd say. If that's a hazard a guess, I think I'd say 12. Anyways, gotta get back to reading. You gotta calm down, Velvet. When's the last time you gotten any rest? Asked Konaka as he nearly forced the rabbit faunus to take a seat. If the girl tried to resist, it went unnoticed, as the girl could barely keep her eyes open. I know, she conceded. I'm sorry, Ken. It's just that I'm worried about my mom, you know? Tuxton's shop is only a few blocks away, so what if whatever killed them is still out there? The police said he had connections to the White Fang, and that's why he was assassinated. You and your mother are safe. This cafe is an honest bust. Velvet! Kaneki had barely reacted in time to catch the sleeping girl from falling off her stool. Sighing, he put her arm around his shoulders and led her to the couch in the quiet corner of the cafe. He unhooked their camera as well as a strange box she carried around and set it on the coffee table next to her. He thought about the girl's last statement but decided to ask about it later. Please, just get some rest. Ugh, excuse me. Ring! Kaneki turned to the front door, and a brisk walk covered the entirety of the cafe. He smiled at the party of four and raised a silent finger to his lips, causing the rowdy girls to quiet down. Welcome to Scarlet Lena Cafe, greeted a waiter with an eye patch barely above a whisper. I'm sorry to ask, but could you all keep your voices down? My coworker is taking a short rest. She's been up a while. If you'd like to take a seat, take your order in just a moment. Confused, Team Ruby nodded and walked to a table by the front window. The cafe was still, the only sounds being the low humming of the refrigerator and a flickering light near the back. What do you think that was about? Whispered Reese. Is this cafe an inn too? You hardly see those around the main city. Oh, who knows? Hey, Rubes, they have strawberry shortcake. You want a split one? Yang asked, ignoring Reese's indignant look. She pointed to a picture on the menu of said shortcake. Shh, you'll hug all the strawberries, Ruby scoffed. I want my own. Are you two seriously going to eat right now? Asked Reese, folding her arms. Why not? The two sisters asked in unison. It hardly seems appropriate, she added, although she could see Blake looking through the menu now. Come on, Ice Queen, loosen up a bit. I know the investigation was a bust, but it's not like we screwed up or anything. It's above our abilities. I never thought I'd hear you say that, Blake chuckled to herself. She saw Yang's betrayed expression from the corner of her eye as she scanned the menu. I meant rank, Yang corrected in a huff. If we didn't have that holding us back, we'd totally be able to find out who killed Tucson. Tucson? The waiter asked politely as he took his pen and pad. His sudden appearance nearly made the girls jump out of their skin. He was eerily quiet. His death seems to be the only thing people talk about these days. I'm sorry for shutting you out earlier. Can I get anything sorry for you girls? I'll have a hot cocoa, Yang said, recovering from the shock first, and a strawberry shortcake. Do you want anything, Rubes? Great choice, he approved. He turned to Ruby. I want a cake. Whoa. I want a cake too, but with milk, Ruby added, narrowing her eyes at Yang. And make sure mine has more strawberries than hers. Yang visibly grinned but said nothing. The young man continued looking around the table. I'll see what I can do, he chuckled politely. I'll have a green tea, Blake ordered, placing the menu back. Coffee, Weiss asked, finally succumbing to the aroma. After the waiter repeated the order to ensure accuracy, he was off. Hey, he said that Aaron's been talking about Tucson. Do you think he's heard anything we can use? He's a waiter, not a detective, Yang shrugged. If he has, there's no telling if it's from a reliable source or not. A lot of people talk just to talk. Well, it couldn't hurt to ask, Blake added, nodding to Weiss. It's not like we're going to interrogate him. The four girls turned to the four girls turned their heads to the one-eyed hair Fuck! That's a tough sentence. The four girls turned their heads to the one-eyed, white-haired waiter, who had made a detour to the corner of the cafe. There, they all saw Velvet soundly sleeping. Fuck! God damn, I suck. There, they all saw Velvet soundly sleeping. The young man adjusted her pillow and left a thin slice of cake next to her camera. From there, he went straight to the counter and began to get their orders ready. Well, I'll be right back, Yang said suddenly as she got up. What are you doing? She's asleep, Yang, Ruby whispered harshly. The least we can do is wait until she wakes up. I need to pee, Yang whispered back, shaking her head and adding a sarcastic sorry. At least Velvet has a coworker who cares about her, Weiss noted, looking over to the exhausted girl. Even from the distance she was, we clearly saw dark bags around Velvet's eyes. I didn't realize how much this was affecting her. Isn't Tucson's only a few blocks from here? Asked Ruby, recognizing the building across the street. She had passed it several times after class during her info gathering. Yeah, Velvet shouldn't feel the need to be scared, but with how the Fang had been acting lately, I would be too. Even if they won't be targeted by the Fang themselves, humans have been notorious for blurring the line between White Fang memory and just a normal fondness. Velvet probably knows that too. I hate this, Ruby mumbled dejectedly. Yang exited the bathroom a few minutes later when she heard a scroll go off. She reached for hers, but it hadn't rang. Looking around, she turned to see the waiter answer his. Normally, she would have gone on her way, but the young man had a mysterious aura around him that she wouldn't mind figuring out. Pressuring herself flat against the wall, she began to listen as he answered. I don't need you calling me. I'm coming straight back after work. I don't get off for another few hours anyways. He replied tiredly. Yang couldn't make out the other side of the conversation, but it was clearly an angry man. You're kicking me out? Yang's eyes widened slightly at that. The young waiter was in danger of living on the streets, yet he didn't raise his voice at all. She leaned over a bit to see his face. The eye patch wearing waiter seemed focused on pouring this and storing that, but his expression was, all things considered, rather mild. She was sure of what she had heard, yet he seemed to be mildly inconvenienced, if anything. To her surprise, his disappointment shifted into a wry smile that didn't suit his face. He shook a canister and began to dispense whipped cream as he spoke. It almost sounds like you care about me, he replied almost teasingly. His slight grin turned into a humorless smile. You got it, Jack. Jack? Yang thought to herself. She began to replay his conversation in her head, then made an O sound. Can I help you? Asked the waiter as she noticed Yang's blonde hair sticking from the wall behind the wall. I'm the only one working tonight, so I apologize for I'm a bit slow to get everything out. Oh no, I'm fine. Yang laughed nervously. He looked at her with a raised eyebrow. Actually, I came over to ask if you can swap my sister's cake and mine. Sister? He looked pensive for a moment, then remembered the other girl who ordered the shortcake. Oh, you and Rubes are sisters? Ruby, Yang corrected, placing her arms on her hips. She put a stern expression, looking at him in what can only be seen as a warning. Only I can call her Rubes. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. He began, but stopped when he noticed a grin on Yang's face. You're too easy to mess with, Yang grinned, cupping her cheek affectionately before walking back to her team. Yang didn't bother to look back as he walked back to her team. It was only a few moments after she took her seat that their order had arrived. Here you are, and he announced. Green tea for the missus in the bow, coffee for Mrs. with the tiara. I realized I didn't ask if you want a cream or sugar, so I brought that on the side. Milk for Ruby and hot cocoa for your stalker sister. Extra whipped cream just for you. Excuse me, said Yang, her mouth dropping. Blake nearly spat out her tea while Ruby and Elise looked at Yang in confusion. You were standing where you didn't think I could see you, but I saw you eyeing me as I made your order, he smiled politely. It's all right, I don't mind the attention. Yang, you said you were going to the bathroom, accused Ruby. Yang began to stammer. I'm prepared for the sudden rush of attention. Ruby crossed her arms and began to grumbling to herself. Always embarrassing me, and flirting with guys, and hogging all the strawberries. It's not what it looks like, she began to defend. She looked over to the waiter who, if he wasn't wearing the eye patch, she could have sworn winked at her. I'm just teasing, he admitted, having had his fun. He placed down the two shortcakes in between the sisters. Enjoy your dessert and drinks. As soon as he was out of earshot, Blake managed to compose herself and smirked. I'll be honest, Yank, I always thought you'd be the straightforward type of girl, not the watching from a distance type. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course. It's not like that, she shook her head. I was listening to his call, and it turns out. Yeah, I'm sorry, that just makes it worse, we added, hiding her small smile behind her mug as she took a sip. Now you're an eavesdropper, too. Yang opened her mouth to argue, then shook her head in defeat. He just got me back, she laughed to herself. What are you talking about? Already face deep. What? Asked Ruby, already face deep in her strawberry shortcake. Shit, excuse me. The red icing smeared her cheeks and chin. First off, gross, Yang laughed, pointing at her mess. Second of all, I was listening in to his phone call, but when I got caught, I started messing with him, how I normally would. I thought a quiet guy like him would be easy to fluster, but he returned fire immediately. Wait, aren't we supposed to ask him stuff about Tucson? Asked Ruby, looking around for something to wipe her face. Aw, you forgot to bring us napkins. He's already coming back with some, Blake noted before nudging her partner. Now's your chance to seal the deal. Yang ignored her partner, making think of how to get it back. Dude, I can feel the deterioration of my fucking speaking ability by the minute. Oof, oof, oof. Excuse me. I can do this. I can do this. Wah, wah, wah. Kaneki looked over to the Velvet, who was still soundly asleep as he brought the rest of the girls' order. I know you both wanted more strawberries than the other, he began, setting out a plate of sliced strawberries along with several napkins. But Marble cuts the cakes in just the exact way so that they all have the same. He trailed off. He looked at Ruby, red icing smeared all over her, and his head began to throb. Nearly dropping to the ground, he barely caught himself on the booth. Hinami, he recalled, holding his aching head. The young girl's face covered in blood as he walked in on her feeding. He then remembered where he was and quickly tried to compose himself. "What's wrong?" asked the girl in white, alarmed. Nothing," he replied, shaking his head. "I just get these bad headaches every now and then. Nothing to be concerned with." "You almost collapsed from it," the bow-wearing girl replied dryly. "I'll admit, this one was particularly bad, but they go away as fast as they come. I'm sorry, do you girls need anything else?" "No, that's okay," the first girl replied curtly. "Can you let Velvet know we stopped by?" "Of course. I don't believe I caught and all of your names." Kaneki took out his paper again to write them down. "I'm Ruby, the one covered in icing. That's Weiss. She's Blake, and my stalker sister Yang." "Can you not call me that?" Yang asked, a bit miffed. "I have a reputation to keep, you know." "Sure you do," smirked Blake, taking a sip from her tea. "You can just tell her team Ruby stopped by," Weiss offered. "Wait, that's not her team." You can tell her Team Ruby stopped by," Weiss offered. Seeing that the girls were off with their banter, he bowed slightly and headed back to the counter where he began to rub his forehead. Try as he might, the quiet of the cafe made it almost impossible for him to not hear the conversation. "Why did you decide not to ask him about Tucson?" asked Blake. "It was your idea to begin with." "I feel it would be more appropriate to ask when he isn't passing out from a migraine," Weiss replied, a hint of sympathy in her voice. "Also, I got the impression he doesn't want to talk about it, judging from what he said." "Maybe we can ask Velvet," offered Yang. "On second thought, she likely needs to stop thinking about this incident instead of remembering anything about it. Poor girl must be exhausted." "Well, if we're done here," began Blake, setting out her empty cup, "I think it's best if we head back to Beacon." "Yeah, I guess you're right," agreed her partner. As a group of the girls made their exit, Haneke decided it would be best for him to close up for the night. Velvet's eyes slowly opened, feeling both energized and panicked. She sat up and noticed she was in her mother's cafe. She slowly began to calm down when she heard her soft voice nearby. "You finally woken up," Kaneki sighed with relief, getting up to check on the girl. He sat across from her, looking at her with concern. "You feeling better?" "How long have I been here?" she asked, noticing that it was very dark out. She rubbed the sleepiness out from her eyes as she stifled a yawn. "You arrived around 4, and now it's..." He looked at the clock on the wall. 5:45. "I've been asleep for almost 2 hours?" asked Velvet as she sprang to her feet. She was about to rush over to put on her apron, but Kaneki stopped her. Actually, 13," corrected the one-eyed barista. "I closed it a bit early, and it didn't feel right to leave you here alone. You see, your mom didn't work last night. I realized you were right about her overworking, so I was here all day. If I had known you were coming, I would have told you, but you fell asleep before I could mention it." "I'm so sorry," Velvet exclaimed embarrassingly. "No, no, don't worry about it," he brushed off. "Please, sit. You just woke up. I'm sure you're hungry." "But my mom," she began, to which Kaneki waved off. Velvet sat down, trying to recollect herself. "She's going to be back here in about an hour," he reminded, pointing to the clock. "She called me 30 minutes ago to make sure everything went well last night, so she's fine. But you're not." I I know," she admitted, much to her embarrassment. Her stomach rumbled rather loudly. "You stay here. I'll get you some milk to go along with that." "With what?" she began before seeing her things neatly placed on the table next to a covered plate. She took the cover off and saw a slice of confetti cake. She allowed a small smile to form as she began to realize how much Kaneki was doing for her. "Your mom baked it yesterday morning, so it should still be alright," he called out. Hope began to realize how badly she let the associate affect her and sighed in defeat. She slowly began to take small bites as Kaneki returned. "Here you are." "Thanks, Ken," she said with a genuine smile. "I don't know what's gone over me." "Well, let's talk it out," he offered, taking a seat across from her. "You said something before you fell asleep earlier, but I'm not sure if you were just tired or you found something out that the police hadn't released yet." "Pardon me?" she said, confused. "You said whatever killed Tuxin might still be out there, but the police all say it was a murder, wasn't it?" That would imply that after a suspect, but you made it sound like something else got him. Hence the whatever instead of whoever. Oh, I'm sorry, Ken. You're not supposed to know, Velvet gasped. In truth, she only found out recently from her own team leader that there was something bigger than the run of the mill murder on the loose. The details were sparse, but it was all pointed to some new sort of grim. The one eyed barista was much more observant than she had initially given him credit for. Well, hey, I live around here, he joked, although not to make light of the situation. I just want to know what I should be on the lookout for, you know? I want to have my best chance at living if there really is something out there. Right, Velvet conceded. She paused for a long time as she thought about her options. On one hand, telling the general public about these sort of situation was almost universally frowned upon. But on the other hand, Kanagi had been nothing but good to Velvet and her mother since her arrival. She took another bite of the cake as she thought about it further. If I tell you, you must promise not to tell anybody else. It would cause panic. Of course, agreed Kanagi easily. I don't have anybody to tell anyway. Velvet put her fork down, walked around the coffee table, and sat beside Kanagi. To say he was surprised would be an understatement. A moment later, she understood as she began to speak in a very, very low whisper. Ken, there might be a grip in the city, and judging by how little evidence there is on it at the moment, it may be a new breed or an unusually smart one. Kanagi's eye widened, though he was internally relieved. He read up on Grimm during the last week, and while there was a lot of them out there, he didn't feel they posed much of a threat to him. Granted, he hadn't actually encountered one, but he was confident in his abilities. The fact that he wasn't directly a suspect eased him significantly. Oh, he says simply. Velvet must have mistaken his tone for shock as she then grabbed his hand in reassurance. She made eye contact with him and smiled gently. It's okay, she said softly but firmly. There was a certain confidence in her voice that normally wasn't there. That's why I want to be close by so I can protect my mom and, well, you and everybody else. Protect me? Kaneki asked, now thoroughly confused. I thought you were a student. Not to mention the fact that your mother tells me about those bullies that pick on you. He thought to himself. Wait, Beacon must be some or of training academy. I know not everybody is meant to be a fighter, she continued. And I didn't plan to become one, to be honest. But when I found out my semblance, it didn't feel right to become anything else. I wanted, no, needed to prove to everyone that faunus aren't the demonized beings we're portrayed as on the media. And if becoming a huntress can do that, I didn't really have another choice. Velvet began Kanagi, leaving a long pause to fill the air. He wanted to tell her he could defend himself. He wanted to assure her that her mother was in safe hands around with him around. He wanted to reveal that he wasn't so helpless, but he couldn't. His ghoul powers weren't something that she could understand, and after coming to terms with being stranded in a world where he was the last of his kind, he knew he couldn't let anybody else know. As kind of Velvet may be, it became clear to Kaneki that she was being trained to kill, which only made her a threat to him. If she found out she was responsible for Tuxin's mutilated body, there was no way he could talk himself out of it. Oh, I'm a half ghoul, which means I have to eat people to survive. But I'm a good person, I swear. The argument was laughable at best. What is it? Velvet tilted her head questioningly. Your friends, Team Ruby stopped by earlier when you were asleep. Oh, what did they want? They didn't say, to be honest. Think they were worried about you, he answered frankly. This whole Texan thing. They're looking into it too, it seems, and I guess I must have noticed how rough you've been taking it since they stopped by to check on you. Oh shit, sorry. I see, she replied guiltily. The muscles of my neck are getting sore, holy shit. Um, I gotta relax. Holy shit. Why am I I'm like so stiff. Um, where was I? Oh, I see. I see, she replied guiltily. Velvet shifted a bit in her seat, looking away from her coworker. Are you gonna stay again this weekend? Yeah, though I won't next week since my team is going on a mission outside the kingdom. I don't know how long we'll be gone. Well, if it helps any, I'll make sure your mom doesn't overwork herself to death while you're gone. You mean how your mother did? Kaneki froze as he heard a familiar voice behind him. That means a lot. Velvet smiled thankfully, giving him a small hug. Kaneki didn't return it as he saw a shadowy figure slowly come in and out of existence. The vaguely humanoid shape eventually settled into a familiar glasses-wearing woman. If it weren't for her permanent coven that marred her face, she would appear almost angelic. Looks like you come back to playing human, Kaneki dear, said the ghost figure Otriza. She began to giggle herself, the same sadistic laugh that brought on the pains of being slowly bitten. Slowly, her laugh became maniacal and increased in volume to a nearly deafening Kaneki. Behind Riza appeared another figure that made Kaneki's blood run cold. A tall man wearing a suit and a hockey mask holding a pair of bolt cutters. You know the drill. Yamadi crackled, cracking his index finger. Start counting. Kaneki asked while they were pulling away, "Are you okay? You're shaking." Kaneki continued to stare at the pair of ghosts as his blurred memory slowly began to clear. 1,000, Kaneki nearly whimpered. 993. 986. Oh, God. I'm fucking struggling. I'm struggling. Dude. Okay. So it took me 2 hours. It took me 2 hours to read 2 chapters. And there's fucking 23 chapters. So that means I'm fucking the shit would take like fucking 12 hours to read. Jesus. Is that right? Is that fucking normal? Or am I just do I just suck ass? I can't tell. Alright, well, I don't really trust myself to continue reading because I feel like I'm just gonna fucking suck ass and just fucking slur a bunch of words and repeat myself like 20,000 times. So I'll cut it here for now and figure shit out. I don't fucking know, mate. I don't fucking know, mate.